initially we were going to talk about how to get in the flow. And if you know what the flow is, if you Wikipedia or search it, the flow is usually referenced as someone who just, when you're on fire, you're in the zone. They talk about it a lot in sports. They talk about it a lot when you're a scientist or when you're innovating, when you're an engineer, a salesperson, when you're just in that like flow, that zone. So we were gonna talk about that. But as we went in deeper, we saw there was a precursor requirement to get in the flow. So in order to get on the flow, you need to actually figure out how to increase your brain speed. How do I think faster? And without the ability to figure out how to think faster, it's very difficult to get on the flow. So should we just jump into it? I know usually we do life events and birthdays and everything.
You can still punch that in. Go
Punch that
ahead,
in.
start punching it in what we set up.
Yeah, anything
Birthdays,
going back a week,
anniversaries.
looking forward. Chris Kelly, you're wearing a hat. Is it freezing over there?
Freezing even in California.
But yeah, birthdays, weddings, anniversaries. I know we've had a lot of tough stuff happen. My brother-in-law just had his aunt pass away from COVID as well. She was 73, very tough. It's just, we have a whole range of things occurring, but I think we kind of, whether it's celebrate or grieve, it's all alone. So I hope you find some, some community, even in this little window, to be able to share some of it. Someone's getting married? My birthday next month.
Oh, wow, congratulations.
Wow.
Wow, that's awesome. March birthdays rock, right,
I
Chris?
don't know, Michaela, if you're inviting any of us to the wedding virtually, but if you are open to that, once again, we were open to potentially join. I say we, on behalf of 130 people in here now, cost you nothing to have a Zoom link, right?
Oh gosh, I love the daughter having a sleepover. Those are fun, or not, Okay.
All right, so
let's do this.
let's go into this.
I don't know for people in London and across the pond if you guys watch the Super Bowl at all, right? But we're gonna, you guys know what the Super Bowl is.
And like it's what we call football, which is like what you would call football, but we call soccer.
Yes.
All right, just to add confusion. Why
because
not?
in the U.S. we
Why
play
not,
football
right?
and don't use our feet.
I'm convinced
Okay,
it probably has to
okay,
do something with like the British, and we want to be against them. So because of the Queen ruling us years back, so our revolting is just to make it more confusing.
I feel like
right?
we're aware of football.
Yes. So just in case you didn't know what football was, American football,
All right.
Sorry. Just in case they didn't. Just really quick, this is the deck we're going to cover. We're going to have a lot of like kind of live demo stuff. But I'm going to show you. So it goes at slide 17. So for those who get scared, it ends at 17. It's pretty, hopefully short enough. But I put over here a picture of Tom Brady. Tom Brady is usually referenced as the GOAT. GOAT stands for greatest of all time, which took me a while to figure that out. I was like goats are agile. That's why I thought goats can climb mountains, but no, he's GOAT because it's an acronym. But Tom Brady was one of our favorite quarterbacks because we both grew up Patriot fans. And then, of course, leaves the Patriots.
And just
we're
Tom
thinking,
Brady fans, let's be honest.
Yes. And then we realized we're not Patriot fans, we're just Tom Brady fans. And so Tom Brady pulled off what would seem impossible. One of the oldest players in the NFL, which is the American Football League, and to win the Super Bowl this last Sunday. He's 43 years old. And should be retired, should have passed his peak. It's a physical sport, right? And to actually get as far as he did and have the most winningest record in winning Super Bowls, in how he plays, and he was playing against one of the top rising quarterbacks, Mahomes.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is 25. I mean, this guy's in fire. I think they had a virtually flawless record for the season. And Brady joined the Buccaneers and they did not have a flawless record. In fact, it was a horrible record, a losing record halfway through. They changed it and then actually went on fire eventually to win the Super Bowl. But if you watch the game last Sunday, I was watching the announcers and pundits talk about what's going to happen. Everyone thought Kansas City was going to win for the most part. It might have been a close game, but they expected Kansas City to win. It wasn't even close. The final score, I mean, it was a blowout by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady. And so I wanted to do a quick comedic relief before we go into it, if you don't mind. There is a, like people love to watch Super Bowl for different reasons. One of them is the commercials.
Yeah.
The commercials are kind of funny, but there is a commercial that was not broadcasted on Tom Brady that was kind of hilarious. And I wanted to,
Okay, you guys know who Gronk is?
My next move should be.
so I'm going to
One
play this
sec.
commercial. Give me
Yeah.
1 second. Let me just pause it a sec. So there was a whole series of fun commercials, and people, watch Super Bowl for different reasons. One is just the comedy of the commercials. This one did not air. And so my wife sent it to me, and it was so funny. I'm going to play it just to give you a little context into what we're going to cover.
Gronk,
What up, TB?
what do you think my next move should be? Give it to me straight. Maybe it's just time I hang him up.
I got one word for you. Retirement. If you retire now, you're gonna be walking on soft sand in a week. Just come to Florida and feel the wind in your hair. Retirement is like winning another one. Maybe I'll even join you.
On the Spotty Network, this is what Tom heard.
If you retire now, you're soft and weak. Just come to Florida and win another one. Maybe I'll even join you.
Just go win another one.
Like it's that easy, Gronk. Maybe it is.
I still feel like I have a lot to accomplish. My goal is to win one more. And Gronk's coming with me.
I'm retired from retiring? Mom, where are my football pants?
Don't trust big decisions to just any network. Go with T-Mobile, the GO in 5G.
And I'm not soft or weak either.
T-Mobile is the leader in 5G.
Gronk,
We just thought that was funny. It's a good commercial. Oh, Jane's with us from, yeah.
So-
Okay,
Why am I showing you a commercial on Tom Brady? So
okay, yes.
it's fascinating in this Super Bowl game. They won, and people could attribute it for different reasons. But there are two things that I saw in the game that really, it wasn't even close. They dominated. One was the fact that Tom Brady played really well. He was very sharp. He was in the flow, and he capitalized on every possible momentum and everything he could. But the second was this: Kansas City made a lot of mistakes. And what was interesting, and I'm going to share an article that Greg, one of our senior leaders, sent to me on Sunday morning. This was before the actual game. Sent me an article all talking about Tom Brady. And he summarized pieces of an article. So let me go and highlight parts of this so you can read part of it with me. Give me a second here. Okay, so I'm gonna do a couple of things. One is, actually, let me highlight first. I'm gonna highlight the parts of this article I want you to focus on. So it talked about Brady, and in this article, it talked about three things: decision-making, his discipline and awareness, and then teaching. I know the bottom cuts off. Does it cut off? I can't tell, but
Can you see it?
keeps
Laura?
cutting off for us.
Oh, you
No,
can see
no,
it,
okay.
okay, good.
All right. So decision-making. It talked about, let's see, playing QB, right? Playing quarterback, QB is quarterback, is about making decisions. And Brady has the quickest mind in the NFL. The best decision making. Now, mind you, this is a physical sport. Most people think, isn't it about being the strongest arm, the fastest feet, right?
Right.
Like you think about physical body, yet the whole article was talking about the sharpness of his mind, his ability to make the right calls faster and better than anyone. And then it talked about how he was very disciplined in basically everything he did. And his success is understanding his limitations and how he incorporates those limitations into his decision making. And then the part at the bottom talks about how he makes it, sorry about the noise here. He's an excellent teacher. So he makes it so easy to communicate. This year, we've had the lowest amount of mental errors as a team I've ever been part of in offense. And that's a testament to him. Kansas City lost making so many errors. And this was before the game. This article, Greg had sent to me in the morning, talking about these things of Tom Brady's decision-making abilities, but also talking about his ability to communicate and teach so that the team elevated and made less mistakes, less mental errors.
Yeah, I think most people think that he's been known for the nutrition and the physical. It's a physical sport, and he's almost been made fun of how disciplined he is in terms of his nutrition and physical component. But the fact that the mind is talked about and researched so much, and I don't know if you're going to share this. Some of the, I forget if we're going to share this, but some of the background we had done. Some of you guys have heard us if you've been with us for a while. We've talked about a guy named Doc. His name is Peter Gorman. He created the Polar Tech heart rate monitor, self-made billionaire. But he introduced us to years ago when Brady was still playing for the Patriots, which was awesome. That all this work they were doing to help Tom Brady in brain speed, and they were making these what do they call it? It was like an MRI, like a mobile MRI, so that you could actually monitor brain speed like while moving. But the point was they were neuroscientists working and doing all this work to help him get a sharper mind and brain. It was awesome.
And so we spent time with, once again, two of the best brain doctors in the world who literally were in charge of trying to speed up and train Brady's brain. How do we make his brain go faster? It was interesting watching some of the techniques they were using. They had this whole machine, and brain speed was tied to reaction, right? You think about when your brain is moving slow, you don't react quickly. Right. It could be physically, but it could also be in someone says something, and it takes longer for you to register what was said, and then for you to respond, reaction. And so they had all these like strobe-like things around, and then you had to tap the light when it went off, and you're looking at it from all around you, almost 360. And so they would train his brain in multiple different ways, including this kind of like movable CAT scan that studied what was happening in the brain as you move. I mean, this is some pretty cool stuff. But what we saw was this: most of us can't afford these CAT scans. Most of us can't afford entire teams of neuroscientists. So does that mean that we're no longer able to get the same type of brain training, right? Speed up our brain at the level of Brady or somebody else. And by the way, I was reading just also this week, LeBron James is trending to get MVP of the NBA. He's 36, I believe. He's also one of the oldest players in the NBA, and they attribute his success not to the physical acumen, but once again to the speed of his thinking, his brain. There's a common theme showing up, and this is sports, where it's about the body, but they're winning, and they're winning at the highest level amongst everyone because of the mind, right? Something's changing, and we're only starting to understand the power of the brain. How do we get the brain faster? And so the punchline that we worked on and discovered over the years is the single best way to speed up and train your brain is to be able to do three things simultaneously. Is to be able to think, talk, and write at the same time. So we can think at 3,000 words per minute, we can talk at 300 words per minute, and we can write at 30 words per minute. And I want you to think that this whole thing is a funnel. I'm going to put a little hole out here because it's what comes out. And when you write, and this is the nuance that gets even more complicated, but important, and I'll explain to this more, there are three ways to think of what you write. One is semantic, which is the use of words, right? So right now I'm writing semantic. The second is figural.
So shapes.
Figural, you're seeing the little bullhorn I drew, the arrows. And the third is symbolic. Symbolic is numbers.
The example of like 2 squared. If you're gonna write 2 squared, you're symbolic, you write 2 with a little 2. If you're figural, you create 2 boxes at the top, 2 at the bottom, right? If you're semantic, you just write the letters 2 squared.
So meaning what is a zero cost, accessible to every human being, and actually, and so I had a whole argument with a neuroscientist that we could train his brain better than what they're doing, but that's a different story. But
to which Doc said, Charlie, they're neuroscientists, they're brain doctors. So are we.
But we got them pausing and we got them thinking, we're doing something wrong. All right, too. But as we had a lot of back and forth, this notion of something accessible to every one of us and the ability in a disciplined fashion to train our brain to be able to think faster. And without this fundamental, we call these BIBs, brilliant in the basics. Without the fundamental brilliant in the basics of training your brain to think faster, you will never get in the flow, or will rarely get in the flow. So this is the foundational precursor to get in the flow.
Or you can get in it, but you can't sustain it.
It's very hard, right? So there are two things we're going to talk about in this class. One is interruption. and to understand how interruption prevents our ability to actually think fast. And the other one is this notion of disciplined practice of brain speed. So I'm just writing all over this thing here, but and what I mean by this, like most things in life, you have to learn how to dial this down. And likewise, you have to learn how to dial this up. They go kind of hand in hand, 1, 2, right? Interruption versus the disciplined practice of brain speed. Think about the notion of getting into deep work when you're just kind of in that zone, right? Working on something and you feel unstoppable, whether it's writing a proposal, an email, a book, an essay, giving a presentation, whatever it might be, when you're just in that flow, right? And you almost feel invincible. When someone asks a question, you're like, oh, awesome, you add it in, you weave it in. I mean, when you're in the flow, it's like you're not fragile. Like, and that is something that we all want more often in a day, if not in a week, in a month. Like some people just want it in a year because they don't barely experience it. There's a way to train to get more of that. And these two things matter a lot. Dialing down your interruption and then increasing your disciplined practice of brain speed. So we're going to cover this today. So that's the topic we're going to go into. Yeah.
It's very true with this thing, but dialing down interruption, working from home with kids, there's a lot of interruption working from home. Look at it this way, the bright side of that is your training in hard situations. It's going to make it, I mean, it's literally going to feel easy when you go back to work relatively, but the training with interruption, that's the stress.
Yes. Right? And so, you know, what's interesting, we were talking about this right before this class. You know, when people think about the word interruption, we think of interruption in certain ways. We just think interruption is bad, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a general rule, right?
Yeah, sounds bad.
We think all interruption is bad. There is bad interruption, and then there is good interruption. Oftentimes, we don't recognize good interruption is what we want more of, and we want less of the bad interruption. And especially when we can find ways to put that in our control, which we will walk through a little bit. The other part that people don't think about is this. Whatever is difficult for you, right? What most of us do is avoid it. I think of like interruption. You know, the mother of all interruption is our own internal chatter. So what do? We are taught to avoid it. How? I want quiet. I'm going to plug out. I'm going to listen to calm. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to basically have silence. I'm going to go off. Now, if that works for you, absolutely stick with it, right? But I know there probably is not a human being, even in this group, if not in this world, who kind of has seen almost a diminishing return on oppressing that side. Meaning it's not working enough. I can't shut down my internal chatter, no matter how many meditations I listen to, no matter how many walks, no matter how much I plug out, this internal chatter, the interruption, the biggest one coming from my own doing, won't stop. So here's the counterintuitive in practice solution most of us never think of doing. The complete opposite side of off. The complete opposite of quiet, calm, silence. Can you imagine the solution being, no, I want more. I want more chatter, more noise, more stress. Instead of off, I want on, but even at a higher level.
It's so interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
it's like, what?
It's so funny. Neil McBride just put in the chat. This is the exact Brain HQ. That's what Doc. So that's what Doc Peter Gorman invented with a team of a larger group of neuroscientists. And there is value to that, right? There's value to these brain games. You guys have all seen, like, there's all these things you can do. And it's interesting. I was just listening to a podcast over the weekend talking about, and Doc had experienced the same thing with the exact tools he was building. Going through the test is part of the training. But if you do it too much, you start learning how to take the test and you're actually obscuring the learning. You learn to do the gaming. You learn the game, you're not learning the skill you're trying to learn. So there's a lot of limitations with brain games. Meanwhile, life is so difficult. If you actually try to train your brain on the problems you have now, we're going to get into some of that, then it's a completely, use the brain training on the life is so difficult already. There's so many challenges. We don't need to be playing games, right? To make our brain go faster. We can actually apply our brain towards problems we have right now in our business.
I think
and our
even on the
life.
games, all things, by the way,
Yeah,
if it
it's
works
just-
for you,
Yes,
do it,
keep doing it.
right?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, like, we've worked with some of the best in brain games. My honest opinion, most of them will fatigue out and won't work. You might eventually get really good at the game,
Mhm.
but not good at life. You need to get good at life, right? Meaning you need to be able to apply whatever you're getting into real life. And a lot of these brain games will get you good at the game, not at life. And so what we found to be the most effective, use the stress of life to practice. And when you get better, it's direct application into your life, right? That's pretty cool.
Yep.
If I can use, whether it's parenting, whether it's conflict with colleagues, whatever it is, and I get that as practice and I get better, it's a double benefit, right? Not only did I get better and train myself, I actually accomplished something that I needed to do.
Yes.
So it's putting practice and application mashed into one. So, because usually it's like, I learned this thing, now I have to figure out how to apply it into my life. And most people think that's easy. Oh no, that's much harder than you think. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the presentation and go to this. All right, so just really quick. First off, 3 things that we like to do in the class quickly is announcements, and then we go into a lesson, which is all about how to increase the brain and think faster, and then a workshop if we have time. So we are going to try to end by 12, if not before, on the main parts, but then try to stay extra for the workshop. So that's our intention, but we'll see how this goes. Quick thing with announcements, we have 3 major announcements. One is, I want to tell you about the community discussion board if you don't know about it, which is directly on COA. It's still hard for me to find, so I assume it might be hard for you to find as well. Our team's trying to get better and better, making it easier. But hopefully if you found it, right, you can talk about that a little bit. The second is we are launching a 4th small group workshop. It's called SGWB3. It's 3 because there is an SGWA, which is the group we run, Megan and I. But this is executive coaching. We'll talk about that for a second. And then resiliency trainer certificates. I think this is kind of an exciting one too. So give me a second. Let me just traverse through this. All right, so somewhere on the site, I know it's in there, right? You can go into a discussion board for this class, Leadership in Practice. And in it, I'm just gonna give you a second to read what was written. They actually fixed this feature. I was responding to Tina, but I had to respond to Lori to respond to Tina, so they fixed this so I could. But basically, this is the very topic we're talking about, right? Tina was asking and talking about this notion of open version of my thoughts. You know, this idea of when do you get to drive your brain on the highway? You know, when I say on the highway, there's no speed bumps, there's no trimming and filtering, but you just get to go and viscerally just speak or write as fast as my brain is processing. Why I drew that think, talk, write, you're seeing 3,000 words trying to shove through a hole when you write that fits 30. Or when you talk 3,000 words to a hole that fits 300. That's the feeling you get of driving in the highway, that kind of horsepower. Most of us filter, trim, talk slowly, word choice. How many times we edit and draft an email so much that we're usually staring at a blank screen and I can't write one word and it takes a while. And I'm like, am I writing at a pace of 2 words a minute? Or is it 5 words a minute? And you'll see many cases, but this notion of learning to communicate with speed is literally the single greatest mirror to understand your brain speed. And keep this in mind. As a rule of thumb, you cannot improve what you cannot see. You need to be able to see something to be able to see it and then improve it. You can't improve brain speed if you can't see it, which is why when you speak and when you write is when you can actually see your brain speed, which means you have a shot of improvement. So anyways, discussion board. So the reason I respond is that it pings me over email when someone writes something in, and then I think when I respond, it must ping the person who I responded to. So use it, please use it. And it continues discussion after class. Okay, so this one is, I know this sounds controversial, let me explain this. This is an internal email we decided to plop in because we love transparency, showing you the people that initially Megan and I were going to add into this executive coaching session called Small Group Workshops. And then with the feedback from the PRT coaches, we changed the list. And I know on one hand, I don't mean to embarrass Christy, Tiffany, and James, But I'm showing you this because you were that close, meaning push hard, being authentic, practicing brain speed, not trimming, not filtering, both on sharing about what you say, reacting to others. And I believe your PRT coaches will say, can you include them into the next executive workshop group that you guys create? But so we took those 3 names off based on the urging of the PRT coaches, and we added the 2 they recommended. And so these are running as soon as, I think today at 1 o'clock, right? 1 o'clock Eastern time. And this is also one step closer then to building up to a point of being a social capitalist, which we shared in one of the earlier lips, where we're looking at creating social capitalists. Well, NextJump will provide the capital, starting at 100,000 a year, moving up to 1 million, then to 10 million a year, where we are going to look to you to do good. Look to you to have the autonomy to go find people who are doing good, nonprofits, charities, education, and literally fund them on a consistent basis. And we believe that's the way you fix the world. Not by one company, one person writing large checks, but by empowering hundreds to thousands of people being able to be social capitalists. And so this is one step closer to that, but also it's a lot better in coaching in a small group. And we are running the 35th small group workshop for our group, very, very high power group, the 35th weekly one since COVID hit. So just if you want, I think it's published on the site, all who's and what, but congrats to the group who made it. The people who were close, you were that close, so just push forward. And then you'll be in the next group probably, all right? The last one, and this is kind of an interesting one. So this is literally the email internally, so I'll let you read it. Maybe Tina, can you give me a thumbs up once you digested this, and I'll tell you a little bit more of this.
Jay, I love the spirit. So close, he said. We'll push forward. Fantastic.
Okay, so this is a big deal. This is a big deal in that when you want to become awesome, elite, right? Who wants to wait to become awesome, elite, get in the flow later? I want it sooner, I want it now. One of the best ways to accelerate is not only be a student, but become a teacher almost in parallel. So you're talking about a stagger step. So the best of the PRT groups, which anyone, by the way, can sign up and join, right? I think another group just launched this week, will be invited up, recommended from the coaches who are there in your PRT groups into these small group workshops. The best within the small group workshops, we have a base of 2,000 leaders, of which I would say half is from the military, CIA, or
Homeland Security or
Coast Guard, Homeland, so FBI. I mean, the who's who of people. The other half is from every other industry, Fortune 500s globally, but these are hand-selected people who spent 3 days in our physical office over the last 7 years getting trained from like literally morning to evening, full 3 days. They have been asking for more help and wanting to get involved more. We have decided to put them all into these PRT workshops, and we decided that we're going to have those people be taught how to be a PR, how to learn resiliency through this 12-week program by the best in the small group workshops. So like a Ruth, I'm just picking for instance. The curriculum and the coursework, we will absolutely work with you. And the course of, by the way, teaching the resiliency training program for 12 weeks will give you a certificate to be a certified resiliency training instructor. It's not you sit in a classroom and you actually have to get into practice and you run 12 weeks of it with real people and you get certified that way. But the people we're talking about is like the who's who of the most amazing people you can imagine, which on one hand, you have to be a little nervous about. The other hand, talk about a kick-ass networking opportunity, talk about learning from them while you teach them. It's gonna be pretty killer stuff. So we have a base of 2,000 people. We're gonna start to reach out to them and start to set this up. So stay tuned for this. We're gonna launch this pretty aggressively and pretty quickly as well. So that's the announcements. Okay, quick update from last week's stuff that I wanna cover, developmental GPS. I want you to think of this as the new performance evaluation system. But instead of measuring performance, it's measuring learning. It's the learner evaluation system. How well are you growing? How well are you learning? Performance evaluations come from the industrial age. What'd you produce from it? If you produce well, it's got a little bit of learning and growth, but generally speaking, it's to figure out how to bonus you, how to pay you, how to promote you. Learner is different. Learner is looking more forward. It's trying to get a sense of not the today self, but the future self. So we're going to cover this in more detail, but these are 3 different topics Megan and I were fighting to figure out, do we teach today or not? So they're coming up, and this is our lab. Our lab is involved with a lot of scribble sheets. One is how to score the developmental GPS. For those of you who don't know, the last 2 LIP classes, we cover this in more depth. But in scoring the developmental GPS, a couple interesting things. We have an internal horse race going, led by Tom and Lokia. They are trying to engineer the web and the mobile version of this tool faster than the rate Mega and I are writing the guideline instructions of how to score yourself on these 5 points. So
We don't like to lose competition.
we don't like to lose,
at all.
right? But we
Yeah,
have like
right.
massive scribbled in the lab whiteboards.
Hey, Chris is voting, rooting for Tom and Lakia. Oh, are you in their small group workshop, you know?
Kissing up to the coach is not good when you need to kiss up to the coach of the coaches. So anyways, but one of the interesting things about this left side developmental scorecard is this, the insight. Unlearning is harder than learning, which is why one of the pieces that will come out is that the person who's skewed to what we call the armchair professor, right? All thinking, not doing, or a micro tactician, all doing, not thinking,
Both. are
usually
very-
will struggle to relearn because they have to unlearn first. The novice, which is someone who scores 111 across the board of all 5, components,
Yeah.
actually will learn faster because unlearning is actually harder than learning. So that's something we'll go into. The other topic we have in our lab is how to use the walls and how to use that as probably one of the best visual crutches to actually puzzle and think through. So we have depths of how to set that up. We're mapping that up in a lot of detail. And the other one that was interesting that's in our lab is basically, as leaders, how do we get this wrong? How do we train followers incorrectly? And how do we actually train leaders incorrectly? To give you a punchline of some of these things, training followers, one of the top mistakes leaders make, parents make, is what I would call false or fragile confidence versus earned confidence. False confidence is when the student or the mentee or the subordinate or the follower has a false sense of accomplishment and they're being that good, when the reality was the authority figure or the leader
Like set it up for them.
set it up and did
Yeah.
everything behind the scenes. So they thought, oh, I'm a better engineer than I thought, when the reality is, no, you're not. If I put you into an ambiguous situation, you will see how much you crumble. They did it all so that it propped you up. So you have a false sense of confidence, and that always catches up. And that's awful because you think you've learned it all and you haven't. The fragile confidence is when you do it intensely, right, through willpower, and you realize it doesn't show up in your default, in your automatic. And so those are 2 of the most common mistakes. There's a lot more depth in there. Training leaders, it follows the dev GPS. When you train leaders, we tend to do all these things wrong, as in like, we tend to give them direction, we tend to give them perspective, and they can never find that on their own.
Give them the big idea,
Right.
what to go pursue.
We even
right?
set up their discipline of working on the hard stuff. We give them the big ideas, we even give them truth, but they don't learn to do it themselves. So it's all that whole phrase of giving people fish, but not teaching them how to fish. It's kind of very perverse and unique nuances of what goes wrong here. It's coming soon. So we have a lot of horse races going on what to teach, but given the Super Bowl, we want, and the flow that we thought was important, we wanted to cover brain speed. But these are 3 things that are kind of in the works right now as we speak. One more thing in the announcements, the last piece is this. Right here's the bluff. The bluff is bottom line up front. That we had a major breakthrough after 40 weeks, what prevents and propels growth in human beings and how to measure it, plus the tools and strategies for improvement. Recognize when it comes to most things human being, whether it's human assessments of the brain or even going to doctors, we have too many assessments with no treatment. I think it's one of the worst things in the world. I can tell you something's wrong with you, but I have no idea what to do, right? Except to maybe go get tested more. And we keep getting tested and keep getting anxiety. What we need more of is assessments that then tell us what to do, treatment, and the 2 going hand in hand. This on the left is a presentation that we had with the head of the Navy. It's called the CNO, around a year and 3 months ago. And so we have been getting requests and are updating and scheduling meetings with the heads of the Navy, the Air Force, several other large organizations. This is the first version of the 2-pager to open up discussions on this concept, that performance evals come from the industrial age. We need to update how we measure human beings. Because if we don't update how we measure human beings, we're measuring the wrong thing for the wrong century. We're measuring usually the today self with a little bit of future self. We need to measure for learners, not for performers. And if you get this right, you will see that the main, because people always ask us the question, well, doesn't performance matter? Doesn't results matter? I can't just focus on learning, right? Because that's future.
Right.
But how about getting today? Like, we need results today. Now, here's the huge insight. If you know how to train people better and faster, you can actually get results in 4 to 13 weeks, which is pretty much short term. Say that again. If you know how to train people and upgrade them fast and better, you can get short-term results and long-term results. And that's what this whole thing is about. So we're walking very senior people through all this. And a lot of people have asked over even.
Yeah, Lindsay, Lindsay from InfoTech, she's asking, like, I hear that top military leaders are involved in this training, but how long is it going to take to trickle down to basically, if she's saying the bottom, if the highest of high.
It's a scaling question.
It's a scaling question.
I love the scaling question. If you do it with no technology, probably a very, very long time. The Navy has 640,000 people. The Air Force has 680,000 people. We believe we could change the whole organization in 9 to 12 months. Now, that will start a gradual process. And the first signs of people changing showing up in 4 to 13 weeks. Only scalable and possible with the aid of technology. Technology and then programs. And what you're experiencing even in PRT groups and stuff, it's leveled programs that allow to use in person, but also virtual to be able to accelerate all this.
And so what we're doing is we're creating all these free tools. I think we've said to you guys before, right? We believe education should be free to anybody who wants it. So, but we're also going to provide all the tools, right? So you'll see this Dev GPS. This is like the measurement tool, but even going through the actual tool and assessing yourself is part of the training. So you have to realize what your gaps are and balances. That will be a free product we're going to launch right into Perks at Work. This is what the team is building, right? A web version, but also to build mobile versions. But we're also going to build enterprise versions where it's just within your organization. So you can just see within your organization what's happening and how you're doing and learning relative to other people on your team, other departments, other locations within your organization, looking at trends over time. So we're going to create enterprise solutions as well. So that's part of this is packaging. And a lot of you have asked us back since March of last year, coming to Leadership in Practice saying, I'm becoming a better leader myself, but how do I upgrade my entire organization to do this? That's the messaging and kind of the packaging we're trying to pull together. So it's a very simple, cohesive 1-2 pager, for example. Here's the problem, here's a solution, not the solution. There's many solutions, but that's what we're working through. And so we're starting with these bigger organizations, but the goal is to make it easy for every company to do this.
Okay, so going more into brain speed now. Brain speed, when you think about it, in theory, right? Now here's an interesting thing. In theory, 3,000 words per minute. Mm-hmm. All of our brains process like that. But you know that phrase of like, if a tree fell in the woods, but no one heard it, did it really fall, right? If your brain can actually work that way, but in practice, it doesn't show up, is your brain really moving fast or not? This idea that, I said, you can't see it, you can't improve it. How do you bring your brain to light? And this is that greatest viewable representation of brain speed is when we communicate with speed. Think, talk, write. Brain speed, communication speed, of being able to do all three, not think, comma, talk, comma, write, all three same time. That is the training we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about interruptions versus this disciplined practice. We're going to give you 3 different levels. And I want you to push yourself to jump to level 3 to increase brain speed, because who has the luxury to wait on this, right? So I'm going to go backwards in interruptions, kind of like those top 10 Jay Leno type things or whatever, anybody else. there's a lot of interruptions, but one of the first things we do wrong is the phone ringer. Every time you get a text and email, does your phone buzz? Does it vibrate? Literally turn that off. Like unless you are in EMS, right? Like emergency medical services, and you need to be paged and be alert that way, generally speaking, you can go into your phone and turn off the function that makes your thing vibrate every minute, second, because there's nothing that will break your flow more than the bling, ding, bling, zzz, 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 like,
Yes, no good.
no good,
And yeah.
right? But we
yes.
do it all the time.
Yeah, Tarun's going to bring up another one we have here, which is email being unread. Just literally having your email open when you're trying
Yes.
to think is such bad news.
So then people talk about news, right?
No, it's okay.
Social media is blamed massively. That it's one of the top things. In fact, the people, we know the people who invented social media and the gamifiers of social media, and they built it like a drug addiction, and they know how to exactly hook you, right? Knowing that the drug dealers built free drugs for you to take, we still do it, right? And then we blame the drug dealers. You have to know, once again, dialing down does not mean off. There's a difference between machines, it's on off. Human beings, everything is a dial. So practice dialing down. And I always say if people complain, just how about like try to reduce it by 5%, right? Or 10%, just dial down. So like even on the phone ringer, if you think text is more important than email, fine, turn the buzzer ringer off for emails, but keep it on for texts. Dial it down, right? Same with news and whatnot. Maybe instead of checking all throughout the day and having a stream flowing through your screen, maybe you check like in the morning, maybe at noon, maybe like once in the afternoon and once late at night, right? So 4 times a day as opposed to all the time, and having a stream that's going through your screen. You will see, right? And by the way, that might be so hard. You might say, you know what? I'm going to try that just 2 days of the week. How about Monday? And then one other day in the week, I'll try that. And every other day I get to have my drug fix of the stream of live news happening through my thing. Try it. Just like the phone thing. You can't do it. Try Monday and one other day, changing the way the phone rings. And what you might find after even the 3rd time only, not as bad as I thought. The whole world's not falling apart, and I'm not missing some critical piece of information that would have vitally changed what I do. And as you actually start to get over this fixation on this information, right, you might realize, wait, I have more time to think now. Emails and text, obviously, and we'll go into this a little bit more detail as well. But like I said, the number one thing is internal chatter. We'll talk about this in a little bit more, but internal chatter, there is nothing that even comes remotely close to the interruptions we face than internal chatter. As you sit in a meeting, as you go see someone, even as you respond to an email to someone,
in your head. Yeah, you're
you know,
in your head.
when who was the one who put in the bulletin board, the whole open, Tina, right? Open version of my thoughts, right? How long it takes you to write an email. What is the internal conversation you're having that's making it so hard to put down your thoughts when no one's even around? You are alone emailing and you can't email. Wow. That internal chatter is like, you know, a circus, like.
You know, it's interesting. A lot of people are talking about lunch. They'll use lunch to look at news. And like that input though, right? It is good, but maybe it's a nuance. We start, because we've been cooking a lot, like just making lunch, and it's interesting. Having some free space where you're not having input and you're not, is actually good for you, right? It's like just to have some quiet, right? And now I know when you're thinking it feels quiet, but not if you're trying to challenge your brain speed, think out loud, right? You need sometimes just that oscillation, but it's almost like a chore. I think Lindsay was saying in the beginning of the chat, it's like a chore. When you're doing chores, your brain can start, you know, thinking, right? You can actually start thinking. I think the challenge is to then absorb more information, at least not for the entire lunch. I feel like it's so addictive.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I've gone to a friend's dinner party at his house, just me, my wife, and him and his wife, and he leaves the TV on during dinner, like loud, because I think the silence is scary in case the conversation doesn't happen. And I was like, you mean to turn the volume down? Like, why do you have it on? He's scared of it going silent, right? We have that. When we're alone, especially now during COVID, we're scared of silence. So we put a podcast and just hit play, and these things don't end. They just roll from one to the next, right? And we have this input addiction, and it's saying like, okay, consider that is more in your control than you realize, or missing less than you think. Just dial it down. Just, okay, every lunch, no, how about Monday lunch? And maybe, I don't know, pick a day in the week, Wednesday, Thursday, just Those lunches, I choose not to do that. Let's see what happens.
So-
Try it 3 times.
So Chris is asking from from the Navy, we expand on the ramping up of noise chatter, like the opposite of going for a walk, meditation? That's what we're about
On
to
the
do.
right side,
So yeah.
right? Think, talk, write.
Yeah.
Level 1 is emailing with speed. Level 2 is note taking with speed. Level 3 is whiteboarding with speed. The hardest one is level 3. And we want to train you to go to number 3. Emailing with speed is literally exactly what Tina said. Open thought, as in one sitting, boom, writing the email, right? Note taking with incredible speed, which is meaning you're in a meeting, a discussion, and oftentimes meetings you have to think, talk, write, all of it happening at once. So we'll walk through these 3 things. And so can I quickly jump off and show you, we have this product called On My Mind. Can you pull it up on the share? If you share.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share with you 2 On My Minds, one that came last night, one that came this morning, which I think will show you the results of some of this training. One is from our good Laura here, right? So Laura, sorry for
Yeah, we're sharing one of the pieces of your
But I'm going to just read the part I highlighted, right? What Laura wrote is this notion of detox. She said, I feel like one of the biggest lessons I've taken away as of late is lean into my emotions. Go ahead, blow up, get it out of my system, and then be able to get back up again. It's way better than bottling up, which has been my default for years, like basically my whole life. So when we initially made the training, we actually wrote, you should think, talk, and write tantrum.
Oh, yes.
Right now, Megan.
Now, I got crucified for this years ago by a sailor in the Navy at our academy that we're not allowed to tantrum on the deck, Megan. And I was like, I'm not saying tantrum at that. But would you rather bring your tantrum home to your family, to your kids, to the people who are not part of creating some of you should be able to tantrum at work. Now, it's not in front of everybody.
No, tantrum
I'm not
has a
saying
negative.
that. It has a negative, but it can be really good. Really
honoring our emotions. We have a tantrum. I think of when something is really good, you can consider a giant celebration a positive tantrum.
Yes.
And then when something is really bad, I have a negative tantrum. Both things have incredible value, incredible signal.
It's like your compass is telling you something really good or really bad, right?
The main difference of someone who hides their tantrum versus who brings it out, one over time gets better, the other one never, ever improves. And that, by the way, is the single biggest source of internal chatter and resulting in slower and slower brain speed.
Which then creates depression and anxiety.
Yes.
And
So there's a whole bunch of things in there.
Why we have a mental health
but so just last night, this was Laura's OMM to us. Love it, right? Love the training we put her through just through 2 weeks, and this is what shows up.
Made me so happy to read this one.
This OMM came from Greg this morning, right before the class. Guilty and excited. We'll read through the parts that matter. So he said, I feel like I'm going in a car, I'm going 70 miles an hour in a car, and I'm used to 40, right? So we're going to talk about this notion of speed. Speed feels like that. Now I've tested 3 sheet sprints. That's whiteboarding 3 times, 3 different things. It is very difficult to do all 3. Think, write, and talk. It is absolutely very difficult. And then he wrote how difficult I find it is to take a messier idea and clean it and simplify it. So this notion we're going to spend more time on, this notion of why, when you even do this virtually, when you do your thinking, talking, and writing, not to self, but ideally with someone, it is harder, but it's going to force you to have to clean it. Yeah. Why? They have no idea what you're talking about. I cannot understand you. And what annoying interruptions come from them. This is what I call the good interruptions, will force you to refine your brain to think faster and better, right? And then he said it's been an area of weakness for him. He's lacked discipline to work on this notion of not only practicing the speed, but then cleaning it, which is another word for communicating it. Why Brady was able to make that difference in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He said, what has surprised me with this approach is that where I have been ending up in the messy sheets is not what I thought, would go. Meaning a lot of times we go into a situation thinking, I know what I'm going to say. I know what my thoughts are. But as you put it out on paper, as you communicate it, it changes. Something feels insightful to go deeper. It starts to go in a direction that didn't anticipate. It makes me realize how much more is inside me that I stifle. Now, the mistake in Greg's thinking is this. It's not just what's inside him, because you know what people like to do? I'm a born genius. I just never knew it. I was just able to uncover this geniusness. No. You are a born genius once you get interrupted by another human being who's also engaged. And when two human beings are actually putting out their thoughts with incredible speed and interrupting each other, what shows up is geniusness, is what shows up is flow. Just being in the messiness of talking it out, movable whiteboard. Now, I know we had feedback last week from someone that says you're sharing and teaching because you guys are in the physical space, but we're all virtual, so not as relevant. So I'll tell you right now, not true, right? Physical, I believe, is better for this. However, even moving a whiteboard right behind me with a blank piece of paper and drawing totally over Zoom.
That's how we taught our first 3 COA lip classes, by the way, just on a whiteboard.
Yeah, before we
behind
figured out
us.
the virtual whiteboard, we did a
that's what we
physical
did.
whiteboard. Perhaps you can't read exactly, but can see it. And so my skepticism on can this work virtually has turned around. So much better than the virtual hub. Do not invest in virtual hubs. Do not invest in buying expensive whiteboard things. Do not invest. Just invest in either these things, which cost. Sorry, I'll pull it up later. Butcher board, giant Post-it notes, or just take your 8x11 and 3x3, make your own, but in a way that someone else can read it. Okay, so that was the email I want to show.
Okay, you're done with this, right?
Yep, you can.
You're done with this. Okay. There's a lot of interesting chat discussion on this. I did CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, but the New Yorkers interrupting each other. I saw something like that. It is interesting. It's not just New Yorkers. I'm from Boston, and he grew up in Nigeria. So there's a awesomeness when you're interrupting, and it could be rude or not, but the point is you're interrupting, and that's the flow. When you can be interrupting each other's thoughts, and it doesn't break the other person's thought. Is a fascinating place to get into, right? It's like
Have
where
you
all the
ever-
goodness is.
Do you recall when you catch up with a really good friend you haven't seen in a while?
Yeah.
And the conversation is running at 1,000 miles an hour, and both of you are just weaving in and out. Oh my God, tangents going nonstop.
Yeah.
Versus, have you ever watched the UN when they talk, right? On TV, they all have a switch. You have to turn it on so one person can talk at a time.
My turn now. I'd like to say
Yes.
something.
And then when you're done, it's almost like over and out. And the next person's like, so this is Germany speaking now. Germany would like to contribute to this conversation. And literally it takes forever. And the speed of the discussion, and people on the sidelines are like, oh my mother God, like these are world leaders deciding things for the world, but they're moving at such a slow pace, right? Like, we're going to change this. We're going to change this and help you train at a much higher level. The image that I liked was this: think, talk, write. Most of us are trained to do it one at a time. Now, you might disagree, but here, test yourself by picking the most stressful thing. Next time you have even a virtual meeting, put your camera on the wall with a giant, either piece of paper or whiteboard, take a marker and see if you can do all 3 at the same time. You'll see when you go to write, you stop talking. And then when someone wants to say something, you're like, can I finish writing? Because I can't think, right? And listen to you while I'm writing. Or when you're talking, can you write and talk at the same time?
Like, I've noticed Charlie, I'll write, and he'll say something, I'm like, shh. Like my automatic reaction is shut up, because I'm just trying to get my thought out. But what I'm realizing is because I need to get faster at being able to hear it and still continue, and then write that down. I'm going to get back to that. Keep going. Not shh, but it's okay. It's part of the practice. Yeah?
But you know what's interesting? I've noticed you don't shush me when we're just 2 of us brainstorming nonstop.
Shush you when there's other people in the room.
Other people in the room, right? Because with other people in the room, there's a greater stress.
Yes. Right. That's right.
But this notion of practicing all 3 at the same time. And a lot of people think we can't do it. Of course you can do it. You know, when you're Tom Brady as a quarterback, you're watching defenders coming at you. You're watching stuff going wrong.
Yeah.
You're watching the potential. I mean, think of how many things are going on at once. And this idea of things aren't going to plan, the other team is trying to destroy whatever plan you had planned, right? You know, when we go to meetings, most of us, you know, when you speak up when it's time to inject the thing you have planned already. Sometimes people have I want to go to this meeting and I already have what I want to say. And I'm just waiting and waiting for the time when I can speak and say the thing I already planned. Or I have something I'm going to write, but I'm going to write it as soon as my time is there. And if something goes wrong, and it's like, now I can't think. It throws my whole game off, right? And in the process of saying something, if someone asks a question that maybe is controversial, critical, annoying, now it's like, I lost my train of thought. And then you do thank you for interrupting me, because now I don't even know what I'm going to say. Like, that's just a signal of slow brain speed.
You know, it's interesting. Peter's talking about being from a family of 7 people and talking over each other a lot feels unproductive and disrespectful, even if it's familiar. So he tries to practice resisting in a business setting, doing that, right? So because it feels rude. And I've said this too. We've talked about that. Where you know, it's fascinating. I do this. I'm trying to let people get their thought fully out. Right? Because it does feel disrespectful. I want to hear everything you have to say first before I give you my reaction. Here's the challenge.
Which, by the way, sounds like an assembly line, no?
It does, yeah.
Industrial age, your part will come. Let me finish my part.
I mean, yes. Because, and here's the thing. It might be rude it might feel rude to the person you're doing it to. You're interrupting. But for you, who has something visceral coming up for you, the thought, the feeling that you don't want to lose the feeling. And that's more important, which is my reaction, I think is so important. Before I lose it, I want to give it. Because what ends up happening is, at least for me, I keep hearing it and listening, and then I lose the courage to tell you what I'm really thinking. Because the longer it goes on, you know, your logical brain, I want to be nice, give them the time. You just start to, we were saying, I know it's not logical brain always kicking in, but there's something that happens where you lose courage to share what you're really thinking, right? And it starts to get into niceness and just logical and no real feeling.
If I think of the extremes, right?
Yeah.
I think dysfunctional. I don't know why I keep thinking like Congress or Senate or just kind of like dysfunctional.
Yeah.
People take turns speaking and they talk for long times, right? And it's like no one ever really gets their thoughts out. So then it goes nuts in social media and press and whatnot. It's like passive aggressive fighting after the thing, as opposed to, you should have had the conversation there. High performing teams.
Yeah, when it's really important.
Whether it's FBI, whether it's, we've spent time
This is the thing. This is why I think we love the military so much. When it's really important and it's life and death and it's mission, you don't care if you interrupted and it was rude. It's because that doesn't matter relative to what you're trying to get done.
By the way, I'm not advocating, hey,
yeah, we're not trying
I want strangers to come in the street and just interrupt Mega and I brainstorming and stuff all the time. No, absolutely not. Not welcome, not coming in. Selection process, who matters? Once you get the team right though, right? And even if you don't, you need to train this.
Yes.
Your ability to think, talk right, despite the stress of being interrupted, despite the annoying criticism, questions, even the glares, it shouldn't stop my brain from processing.
Yeah.
And the way, and by the way, on the writing, the semantic, figural, symbolic, you want to know how to do it faster? I think of playing Pictionary. You know, play Pictionary or Cranium, any of these games. You know, it's hard because you're not allowed to use symbols, numbers. When you write and you want to write with speed, you write fastest if you can use all 3. But we restrict ourselves. I'm a shape person, figural. So I only use diagrams. That's Pictionary, by the way. Or I'm a word person. I always write. There are some thoughts that you can convey way faster, right? Just through a combination of a word, a symbol, maybe even a number. So the ability to learn all 3.
Lindsay's asking about increasing brain speed. How do you include active listening? Because like, it's true that talking and writing, thinking actually, unless you're saying it, is not an output. That's your thinking.
So you know what? You know, I think of active listening. What I think about is here's another way to look at it. How do I invite interruption? That's active listening. Talk about the most active listening. I'm trying to make a thought, and I'm going to set myself up so I can invite interruption. Make it really easy for you to interrupt me, because that means while I'm trying to get my thought out, I need to listen to what you're saying. Yeah. That's because a lot of times people I'm doing active listening, which is why I've been so quiet this whole meeting, right? Which is why I haven't said a word, right? I'm active listening, and my time to speak will come in the next meeting when I'm going to write a memo for you of what I really thought in this meeting, even though it's now irrelevant. I'm going to write it up anyways, right? Like this idea of active listening, train under higher stress. As you're trying to make your point, find ways to invite interruption. Now, this is why the whiteboard is the key. When you whiteboard and you write, you're trying to communicate something, and you're looking at the facial expression, the silence, maybe the curious or critical question, maybe you don't like. So you know why semantic, figural, symbolic comes in? You're trying to communicate a different way to understand what you're trying to say. Yeah. Right? They're not understanding, and that's what's coming through their interruption or criticism. You're actively listening and while trying to re-communicate fast. And if a word didn't make sense, you draw a diagram. If that didn't make sense, you might use a number, you might use a combo, and then you might have to step back and say, hey, can you tell me what you're trying to think? That is the active listening you want to get to. Yeah. Not the assembly line version of, hey, my light says listening mode right now. talking mode now,
Yeah.
writing mode, like that's literally like an assembly line going phase by phase. That's slow. Can you imagine if Brady played, you know, in the Super Bowl? Whoa, whoa, whoa. What is this defense coming at me? Can I just focus on offense? What is this offense? I just want to focus on defense, right? Like this idea that there's nothing faster than the ability to process every which thing going the wrong way or right way, not the plan life than the human brain. But because we have learned to turn it on one at a time only, and then train everyone around us to do the same, we don't get the full benefit of speed.
I'm dying for us to get through this so we can get to their questions because there's so many good comments and questions, and now my head is spinning, and I have so many different conversations going on in this head, and the brain is not fast enough to be able to. There's like physical piece, yes, Mike, to like Lindsay, yes, PRT, but there's a whole other program we're building around how to get better at this. So yes, and we're gonna get to this.
Right. So I know we're at 12, but so there's a lot. We can go to some questions if you want, because speed, by the way, like Greg mentioned, whether you're a skier, I love skiing. I like to brag that I was in ski patrol, but I was in ninth grade, but still different story. But driving cars, you know, the first time you ever drove like past 60 and you hit 70, do you ever have that feeling, oh my God, I'm driving 70, I could die, I could crash. You get there and you get comfortable with 70. I don't know the first time you ever drove 80 miles per hour, right? And sorry for the people non-US, I forgot what that is in kilometers, but it's something like 120 or 100, maybe 120 kilometers, wherever it is approximately. That feeling of like, I'm not comfortable with that. And then I don't know if you've ever driven 90 miles an hour, right? The fastest I think I drove was 110 miles an hour in the highways in California, because they're like 6-lane or 8-lane. And it's amazing, once you get to higher speeds, the lower speed seems slow. So slow to the point where you might just drift there by accident. I've driven, I'm like, oh my God, I'm driving 85, I gotta slow it down. Or, oh my God, I'm driving 90, I gotta slow it down. But the first time you do it, it does not feel like, oh my God, I'm driving. It's like, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna lose control. You go faster to build comfort. Speed is something. Speed training will increase your comfort zone. We do not know how to run and operate in the information highway that the world's become, and the brain that can process like an information highway. So we only run like it's a dirt path. Instead of the highway of information, we're on a dirt path. And it's like, there's only room for one at a time, right? And how do you actually learn to go on the highway? You gotta increase your speed. And so that's the parts of, should I just show you this real quick? So, you know, maybe we can go into more depth in this and get questions if you want. You wanna do questions?
Do you guys wanna do questions?
I can't tell.
I can't tell.
We have email.
Are you staying for a few more minutes? Okay, wait, they're answering, so we have to get back to them. Okay, some people can't stay. Okay. So Lindsay's like, I want to hear more, but
what do you want
this
to do?
is so good. We can continue next week, this topic, but there's so much goodness in here. Well, I can't remember what the heck was left.
Tell me what you want to do.
This was the tactics. There's only a few things left. This is good. Let's go to questions.
Well, actually, we have a lot. We can go into how to whiteboard better. I have props here to show you how to whiteboard better, how to note take better.
We underestimated how long it would take us to get through this. There's some really good questions.
Of course, I blame her because she never cut me off.
We'll continue. I'm cutting you off now. We'll continue. We're going to continue some of it next week. Right now, though, I think there's some good questions. Chris from Seattle is mentioning this emotional shutdown, meaning, let me just find it. You're going to have to scroll her off right here. Chris, you can unmute if you want. This experience dealing with so much input, but then emotion is what shuts you down.
I can say for me personally that, I have experience, having to listen to multiple comm channels at the same time, having to take multiple inputs and still be able to function on a, analytical, I guess, realm, but you throw an emotion to that and I struggle, to say the least. Like I can tell you that, if my wife and I are discussing something, that has an emotional or stressful component to it, like in that realm, I find it very difficult to react with any speed. And she actually laughs at me because I'll just like stop talking for a minute. It's like, wait a minute, I need to, figure this out. So, there's different components to that also, it seems.
So can I tell you my first reaction? One is that, when we think of being like emotionally tilted or out of control, right? Even the word emotional has such a negative connotation. We never think about the fact that our emotion is like when you fly or take a ship or a submarine, it's like our radar. And when it blips, like high or low, which is, either excited, happy, or extremely sad or angry, it's telling us something, right? It means more. And where do we find the space and time to understand how to use this radar? The greatest sensor we have is actually our emotion, but we have taught ourselves that it's bad, right? And you know what that comes from is the industrial age. Because in the industrial age, when you have 1,000 employees in a factory, I don't want to hear about your radar going up or down. I just want you to get the job done. Because what's more valuable than you, the head count, is actually the machine and the factory I have. Well, this has changed. And the value of and the power of human beings is actually, there's nothing faster than understanding how to see the downside of your emotion. In fact, what Tom Brady had said, right? The whole success is understanding his limitations and how he incorporates those into his decision making. The emotions have a cost when used the wrong way. It's like the Force, right? Ever watch Star Wars? It's the same thing that does good, but also does bad, the dark side. The emotion is a force. It's a feeling, but it's picking up things faster than you can imagine, and imagine being able to use it. This notion of email. Have you ever written an email without stopping? Like, in fact, I want you to practice this. The trick is ASDF is the keyboard on the left.
Yeah.
Put in the CC ASDF. Just type it in. And so whoever you respond to, you don't accidentally hit send. Because an email won't send if it doesn't recognize the name. So literally in the CC box, type ASDF, which is the 4 left keys on the left of the keyboard. And then just in one sitting, write your email. As in, not edited, not filtered, not the polished version, the messy, emotional version. When you open an email and you sense this like instant, like your brain's going, as you read it, it's processing. Write it down. What do you want to say? We always forget, you can edit it. You can reread it, which takes you like 30 seconds to a minute. And you'll usually find over time that visceral response stays 95% of the time. And the 5% change is 1 or 2 words, if not 1 sentence you remove out. And you'll see that email has more meaning than usually what we write is what we call a low-calorie email. A low-calorie email has been filtered and filtered so much, it's whitewashed and bleached, like says nothing.
But even just by saying to your wife, Chris, I'm trying to think of like the tactical, like, what do you do, right? When wife is like, great, now you're shutting down, you're saying nothing. It's like,
say something, right?
Right, you have to say something.
Like, so the other thought I had was when we went to Parris Island, which is where they train the Marines and like they put you through this crazy, scary stuff. They put us actually through it, which I thought they were joking, but they're serious. And the person who was yelling at us nonstop, it was terrifying. She lost her voice in the middle of it. So I'm thinking, oh, this is great. This is over, right? She lost her voice. She somehow pushed through.
Like fully lost it and then kept trying. And I thought somebody was going to save her. No.
She found her voice again.
It came back.
And I remember like afterwards, I was so puzzled. I was like, oh, how did you do that? She was like, do what? I was like, how did you re-find your voice after you lost it?
It was gone.
And
then
she
it
said,
came back.
you know what people don't realize, if you push, it always comes back. I was like, I thought you have to just take a break, take some lozenges, take an overnight, 3 days to get it back. If you push after your voice cracks and lose it, you get it back. It's the same thing with emotion. Don't stop. You push, and you will get to this other side. And you will discover a whole world you never knew.
Tactically, though, what I would say, Chris, is I think sometimes you just give yourself permission to say, "This is putting me on tilt. I feel like I can't even." It's like to actually say what's going on in your head, which is, "I hate this feeling," or "I always do this. I'm shutting down. Why am I shutting down?" To actually let that out, because I think that's the part where if you could just say that, and there's another question from Mike that I wanted. Okay. If you just let that part out, I think it gives you the freedom to now think about what you're thinking. You know what I mean? Like I've done that where I'm like, I'm in my head right now. Why am I in my head? I'm upset that I'm in my head. Sometimes gives yourself the permission to just go. And even if you said to your wife, it's happening again.
Megan's done this really well.
It's happening.
No, this is really good. Like the idea of think, talk, write. Have you heard the phrase think out loud? Mm-hmm. Right? And I know people say, what the hell does that mean? Think out loud.
Yes.
That's thinking out loud, as opposed to think inside to yourself.
What I'm thinking right now is I'm upset that you're talking to me about this right now. And
I feel like
came
shutting
home
down
from work, and now I want to shut down because I wasn't expecting you to say it, but now I'm feeling bad. You actually have to share your schizo out loud, because then she now knows what's going through your head, even if it's not fully formed. It's that you're struggling.
Yes.
You're struggling.
Have you ever seen a presenter come up and you can tell they're nervous as hell, right? And you're watching them and you feel more nervous because they're nervous, right? And now you're not sure, are they nervous because they're lying about whatever they're gonna talk about? Or like, are they nervous? It's like, have they never done this? Like all these thoughts, if the presenter says, I'm really nervous because of blah, 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 like it just gets everyone's shoulders to calm down. That notion of just think out loud, whatever you feel, practice putting words as rapidly as possible. Now, here's what we do. When we are in emotional tilt, what do we train as a child? Take a deep breath, calm down, pick your next words carefully, right? No, pick your words carefully because you're upset, right? And so what does that do over time? It forces us to shut down our brain and slow down our brain. But our brain doesn't slow down. It's just the talking that slowed down. It's only the writing that slowed down. And there's where the whole system breaks apart. So I'm not saying go to your next meeting with the most important person who could probably fire you or punish you promotion-wise and say, you know what I just learned from Charlie? Just mouth off, right? Just write whatever's in your mind. No. There's an absolute cost, which is why these things have been put in place. You need some guardrails. We're talking about speed bumps. But between the speed bumps, I want you to run like hell. These PRT groups, once again, they're speed bumped. You talk mile a minute. Do not sit there being quiet, thinking, I'm just the absorber here. No. Your brain's not training. Train the brain. Find the places, 1, 2 people, places, the whiteboard, and literally see how fast you can push, how much you can think, write, talk at the same time, stop, get interrupted, process, try again, have them try to do it, then say, you know what, I don't like what you're writing. I'm going to write on my side, put your camera, see if you can replicate that close feeling of when you catch up with a close friend. And literally, it's like mile a minute, tangential conversations going. That's the flow. We find it with close friends. Can you imagine when you can find that on mission and revenue?
And this is where I think, because somebody was asking about setting the tone and the culture of interruption, I think that's the wrong place to go, right? We're just set the culture and the tone that we're going to interrupt each other. No. Find a few people that you can actually get in that flow with, and then you know what ends up happening? You know what we end up doing after we have that kind of, there's almost like that window where we'll look at each other where it's like, a little bit of me wants to punch you in the face right now. If I want to punch me in the face, you hit those windows where
She'll say those out loud,
but I'll say I want to punch you in the face right now, but keep going because it's like I know it's good. But and then afterwards he'll look at, we're like, are you mad? Are you mad? No, because you know why we're not mad? Because that was awesome work.
We got
that
to a
was
good place.
awesome work. We just had a massive breakthrough. And so instead of being mad at each other, we're like, oh my God, I want to do that again. And it becomes addicted. And then you start to realize, wait a minute, when that's happening, that's because we're in the flow and this is good.
We'll
not like, let's set the tone. We're going to interrupt each other. This is our new culture. It's like, that's not, nobody's going to change anything for that. It's that hard.
We're not giving you a license to be
No.
rude or be an asshole.
No.
That's not it. Right? Which is why, once again, selection process
Selection
matters.
matters. Who
right?
you're doing this with.
But you need to know
Yes.
if you don't ever take your brain and run it on the information highway,
Yeah.
they'll never actually get better.
Can I
You'll never even know what's
switch
feeding
gears
them.
to Mike Collette? You were asking a really interesting question around, I didn't read the whole thing because it's long. I have to find it now. But Mike, do you want to unmute on the fitness and how that fits in?
Yeah, so, as it relates to the brain speed, I was thinking more along the lines of like filtering and clarity. So what I mentioned was aerobic exercise can play a major role in getting into the flow state. And from my understanding, it increases levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor in the brain, which helps with productivity and brain function and memory retention. So I was just wondering if this was like a factor in getting into the flow state. So for example, doing 15 or 20 minutes of cardio, taking 5-minute break, then going into these sorts of mind mapping sessions or collaborative sessions.
I think of, I don't know if this is the right way to look at it, Mike. It's, you want to use your brain more like HIIT as opposed to marathons, right? Like HIIT, like high intensity intervals. And so but ideally, the best way to train your brain is with another person. It's what Brady did well that got the Tampa Bay to make less mistakes. It's communication, right? Communication is messy. And I think the part we don't recognize is this. There are 2 parts to all communication, whether it's written or whether it's oral. There is the polished, clean version, and then there's the messy. And we don't recognize and honor the fact that the cleanest ones come out of first experiencing messy. So if you have a more consistent space where you can create messy, you're gonna also, if you build the other ritual, which is, by the way, the example in Greg, he was good at being messy, but never built a ritual for clean, for clarity. You need both, right? but you'll see it's like an 80-20, if not 95-5. The messy is more time, more space, and then the clean is faster. But you need both. Instead, we focus so much on the clean, we actually start almost all thinking, all presentations, starting with how does the other person receive this? Let me backwards work my presentation by first opening a PowerPoint, making the frames of the slides and the color schemes and everything, the branding and logo, before I even figure out what content should go in. Right?
So can I wasn't because just the
Sorry.
question you mentioned on aerobic though, driving flow state. So I make Charlie dance a few times a week because part of it is it's aerobic and it's like high intensity, but there's music, which also gives you a chance to kind of, and it's like you start and you just go. Prior to a workout like that, we insert the thing that is most complex that we're working on. And then right after, even if it's 20 to 30 minutes, is when we revisit it. And that we have found over years creates more flow for us. Oh, why we've had dance in our schedule for breakthroughs, because right before we do it, versus if right before we're working on something complex, we insert it right before we go to work out. And then to do like Pilates or something, we tried it, right? Because I love in bar, I love Janine, I love Allie's Pilates. We tried it and it doesn't work for us to actually help us get into the flow. It's something that does something else for us, which is like the recovery. But you know, I've noticed we tried.
I know, but so here's like most counterintuitive part. Working with some of the best athletes and whatnot, this idea of a true oscillation.
Yeah.
Right. In sports, you oscillate a lot. You know the Tabata and all the stuff.
Yeah.
20-second, 10-second rest.
It's not Tabata
right?
bread, it's Tabata. I think.
Tabata, whatever. But
we miss
like
bread.
But
yeah.
Different story. But when you think of physical oscillation, the greatest oscillation is to oscillate between the mind and the body. And it strengthens both if you do it right. So what ends up happening, because do you know how hard it is to shut the mind off? People think you can just because you meditate. It is so much harder than you think. One of the best ways is finding the physical workouts where it's near impossible to not pay attention.
Yes.
Dance is one of them.
Near impossible.
I mean, I struggle with. You literally miss a half second. What's it called?
One count out of an 8 count.
The half count. They have
The
a half count, right?
Like
I don't know why some of this is a half count.
Janine's
no
a
half count.
professional dancer, you
Right.
know. So
But
she's
literally, you miss a half count and it's over, right?
Yeah.
Like now you're like behind everyone. You can see it for the rest of the
so
class.
you have to pay attention. You can't put
It's
your brain
awful.
on your problems. You gotta like drop it.
So when you work on the most stressful mental stuff, this is why when we did our leadership academies, we would do dance the first night because the first full day, everyone can't stop their brain. They go into this dance class and literally they make fools of themselves. But like there's a part where they actually don't even recognize it's forcing a mental oscillation because it's the one thing you have to pay attention.
You have to pay attention.
Almost everything else you can do without really paying
Mindlessly.
attention, mindlessly.
Yes.
This one and like spin
And then
class
the more
we
I
do
know,
later.
the more I know the routines, the more my mind will wander, and I don't like that. And then I'm
Yes.
like, it's not doing it for me. Oh, it's because I'm starting to learn the routines too much. They need to switch it up because I actually need something to allow me to disengage, so my
and so, but-
subconscious can work.
So here's fascinating too. Top neuroscientists in the world shared with us that one physical sport that makes you smarter is dance. It's the one thing that's less repetitive in nature. And because of the different variations, it actually makes you smarter.
I have
Proven
like
in the research,
like a 15-year head start.
Right? This one's true. But just to practice the other side more. But
I have
that's
to practice the
different.
other side.
We're
We're
both
just talking
practicing.
about strengths
But
here.
yes, true.
Sorry,
But
just kidding.
dance is one of the best, right? And especially when you're learning something you don't know taught by someone else, you'll see your mind shuts off. And you know, it's crazy how much we hold on to stuff because we might forget it. Like you underestimate the power of our brain.
Yeah.
You won't forget it. If you drop it and then pick it back up, you'll see that you might get a breakthrough, a fresh approach. Somehow we think like thinking is the same as taking a hammer and crushing a giant boulder. If I just keep putting pressure and smashing it, eventually I'll have a
I
breakthrough.
have to have a breakthrough. I
Right?
will have a breakthrough
It's like a
tonight.
brick wall. If I just keep
will.
hammering on the brick wall with
Yeah.
unending relentlessness of breakthrough.
Oh.
No.
Doesn't work that way.
It's counterintuitive to let it go. And then come back to it is how you get the breakthrough.
Mhm.
The best thing was dance physical. Now on the mind to mind, silence is harder than you think. I think laughter is far better. If you want an oscillation on something on the mind to mind, go from super stressful stuff to actually like comedy, laughter, ideally with
Oh,
someone,
yeah.
then go back to the hard stuff. That's another oscillation.
Good stuff. Christine's inviting us to her Tai Chi class thing, or Tai, sorry, I'm watching it up. It's Tai Chi well-being, but Tai Chi fit.
Any
Okay,
other
Christine. Oh,
questions
sorry.
about that?
Those are the multitasking thing was interesting. Monica was asking, I don't know if she's still here, but it feels like talking, writing, and thinking is multitasking, but we're talking about all on the same topic,
Like,
right?
can I tell you when I think talking, thinking, and writing? I hate some of these terms because it's been trained to either do it, don't do it, and then multitasking make it stupid is what I've heard. And like I just think about being human is using all three at the same time.
Mhm.
But we've been kind of taught through handcuffs and duct tape and all the stuff to be proper, that there's no space for messy, there's no space for emotion, there's no space for interruption, there's no space for all of this. And so then we have trained and convinced ourselves that's all bad. So how do I just get prim and proper, only good? And then you know what? Like, you know, the whole thing, everything you suppress, it comes out sideways. So it
Yeah.
comes out somewhere.
Yeah.
Where do you go and unleash your full interrupting,
Mhm.
like visceral, like, I mean, where does this go?
Mhm.
To a spouse, to a sibling, right? Maybe to yourself, right? Which is probably the single worst thing. It goes somewhere. But if you are able to bring it to light, this is the crazy part. Anything messy you see, you can make better. Get someone's help, it's even easier to make better. But anything you cannot see is what we call stuck in our heads.
Mhm.
You can't make better. You're making up what you think you see. And then someone else says, what do you mean that? That's totally not what I see. Like, and so you're obscuring everything. Like, we somehow think we have clarity of mind just because I think it. No. Why don't you test it? Put it on paper and see what someone else thinks. That's what whiteboarding does. And when you do that, you'll get a sense if you have clarity of thought, because someone else will be like, that makes no sense to me. Okay, so maybe I'm going to put some diagrams down to help. Still doesn't make sense. And then they say, have you thought about this? And what are you trying to do? Through that process, you get clarity. And that's how you get your brain smart. Think faster. It's counterintuitive. Like, you need to learn how to drive your brain, like not in theory, but in practice, on the information highway, not on the internet, by the way, with strangers you don't even know, right? Not with what we call drive-by coaches or pedestrian or drive-by shooters, whatever you call it, but like by real people, right? Who have a vested interest in this conversation, right? And even if they're annoyed at you, isn't that a signal that's good? So then I want to know which part annoyed you? What did I do? What exactly was a juncture that annoyed you? And then if they're able to tell you the truth, then you can try again, but try to adjust, try to fix.
Is there any of the questions you guys are having? I'm looking back at the chat. There's some things, I think we've covered a lot of it, but if you guys go ahead, if you want to stay, we'll stay a few more minutes, throw in another thought or question that you're having. that
Punch
you're
it in the
thinking about.
chat, you can unmute if you want.
Rosemary likes your messy.
Rosemary, I take that both as a compliment and an insult, but I'll take both. I like it.
Hey, Charlie and Megan, this is Tiffany. I probably missed it, but I wanted to know exactly how long do you think it takes for you to properly train your mind and to talk, write, and think?
So we can get you there in 4 weeks, but the full training will take 12 to 13 weeks.
That's if you train
Right?
deliberately, aggressively.
But delivery is not as much as you think. It's just twice a week, but you can't miss it. Twice a week ritual. So we'll cover this in more detail next week since we didn't get to it, but the whiteboard, right? These messy sheets you're going to create, produce 2 a week. It's going to be harder than you think. But even producing the third one, not in the same day, by the way, different days, right? By the time, so most people say, oh God, I wish it was a shorter solution, right? Is there like a video I can watch that's like 2 minutes or less? Or maybe a pill I can take, right? Or maybe something I can play while I close my eyes sleeping, like an app that just kind of sharpens my brain while I just go comatose, right? Like, I wish it was as simple as that. Like, don't fool yourself. Like, people always ask, like, why do you find all these hard ways to train? Yeah. And the real question is, why do you think there's another way? What makes you think there's another way? Don't buy that BS. This is hard work. Do you think Brady just happened to find the hardest way to train his brain, but someone else just happened to find the easy way?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard work to train, and especially to untrain what has been ingrained in our system of education for 100 years.
Like we've always said, though,
So-
once you get the insight, though, within 24 hours, you need a strike. So for
Yes.
instance, last Thursday, we run these COAs, we end, what time, usually done around 7 p.m. Eastern
Yeah.
time. But then we have dinner, we talk with our leadership team. But then it was like around midnight, we started getting more clarity in this thinking, talking, and writing, and this whole process, and realizing kind of the gap I have. Literally, it was like 1 a.m. last Thursday night. I'm going to try right now. Let's go. Like, when you get the insight, go. Because the courage to try stuff that's uncomfortable and out of your comfort zone, it's just too easy to delay it. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. It just never it's hard. This is really hard. This is the hard training.
So I'm going to share with you one thing. So you have homework to actually do. This, I'm going to give you the hard stuff. This is the easy stuff. Screw the easy stuff, right?
Yeah, go hard, yeah.
Because this, if you want to get better, you see on the bottom, this is one of them is Laura, one of them is Dana, but like they're practicing. This is a giant sheet whiteboard. Pick a topic. Either it's going to be, so ideally, this is kind of counterintuitive. Start with something that's easier, because trust me, brain training is one of the hardest things. Easy is something home, personal, culture, and then towards the end of the week, do one that's harder on your actual mission, revenue, the work stuff. Meaning, see how fast you can communicate, even over Zoom or video or someone at home, like how fast you can communicate what is in your head or how you're going to attack this, as in win big. So like whether you want to have a high school graduation party for your daughter, or you want to have like, I don't know, like when COVID's over and you're going to, what's the first thing you're going to do? What's your first vacation? Let's make a plan, right? Boom. And practice taking a whiteboard sheet, communicating your thoughts, trying words, shapes. It's like, think of Pictionary. You know when the clock is going, you got 1 minute to go? I want you to play with that type of urgency. You got 1 minute, maybe we'll give you 2, maybe 5.
But you can write numbers and you can write
and
words.
just with speed trying to communicate. Do not
Yeah.
focus on like handwriting, being speed. And then get someone to aggressively interrupt you as you do it, right? Which is the aggressive interruption being not like annoying interruption, but like genuine.
Saying challenge.
They're
me. I'm
active
done with that,
listening,
yeah.
and they're now asking questions. What do you mean by that? Really? You're going to do that? That's stupid. Like, honest stuff.
I don't know if you're married, Tiffany, but I find with my husband, I actually tried to do this the other night, helping. We were gonna move and we're changing school for my young one, and whatnot, all this stuff. It's very stressful. And I was literally, I did like my 8x11, my step 1, which is all the buckets of stuff that is on my mind that we need to think through. Whether, you have your buckets of, whether it's finances, different towns, different schools, other things on my mind, and just start to, spouses will interrupt you and they will challenge you. Like, what are you talking about, Megan? Like, and it's like, I literally, at some point I was just, oh my God, bro, you're not on my page, right? And then I realized he's not hearing me, why I'm stressed out, why I'm struggling. He's thinking about something different than I am. To actually get my point across and get heard, but having him also felt heard, I have to allow the interruption is very hard to do. But
And adjust.
And adjust. And I find though, I mean, it can be annoying.
That's the
It's
act
like,
of listening
and
while
adjust.
trying to communicate.
So I literally took like what was actually a Connect 4 box that Matthew's like super into. I grabbed it and I took an 8x11 on the couch next to him at like 11 o'clock at night. This is what's on my, and I drew it because I feel like this is where other people, just by communicating verbally, is not enough. They need, and I need it, right? Like I need it because I also don't want to look directly at him a little bit because it's like, it's tough stuff. And so I kind of need to be here and both of us be looking at the sheet together, not staring at each other in this very uncomfortable discussion for both of us.
So can I tell you like what's fascinating? Jim Fadigan, who we spent a lot of time with, is the guy who invented the Sesame Street character, is one of the top neuroscientists in the world as well. What he discovered was fascinating. One big insight: why education is so broken. It's no different than why leadership managers are so broken. The way we learn is the way we teach. Whatever was good for me is the way I teach, without recognizing I'm trying to teach. As in, successful teaching is not because yes, I got the words out of my mouth. It's when they adopted and understood it. But so just because it worked for me doesn't mean it works for them. And what he discovered was that people process stronger in one of 3 ways: through words, right, semantic, through diagrams and shape, which is figural, or through numbers, which is symbolic. And so whatever you're skewed on in terms of how you learn, learning preference is the way you talk. Well, you know what happens when you whiteboard? You're trying to communicate with your preference first. Always go first, right? You'll see their confusion. And so most people just go harder on what, you know what, I'm just gonna write more words.
If any of you have ever taken Mitchell's dance class, it's at 7 Eastern Standard Time, but he's been our dance instructor forever at Next Jump. It's fascinating. He's one of the best dance instructors because he will count, which is symbolic, right? Because he actually learned, he wasn't a good dancer, he'll count, which is symbolic, like 1 to 8, whatever, countdown, counting to 8. He'll use sounds and different, like, ga, ga, ga. And some people like that, like the beat. Or he'll actually use semantics. He'll put words to certain emotions. Remember the eat the muffin? One of them was eat the goddamn muffin for Level Up song, And he said, eat the goddamn muffin. And everybody was like, what are you talking about? Eat the goddamn muffin. Well, that's how people are remembering the word versus saying, I just count. Chris is laughing because he knows it's true. If you're just a dance instructor and only uses counting for counting, he's like, what is
I'm like, I like to start counting at 1. They like to start counting at like 7,
I
8,
like to sing the words
6,
because I
7,
know
8.
the words. So I do it based on the words, which is semantic, but not everybody does. He loves Mitchell because he's a great teacher because he's using all the different ways people learn, not just the way that works for him.
So
right?
this coming back to communication, right? When you whiteboard and you actually allow for interruption, what you'll learn is this: your one way that you prefer isn't working, which forces you to have to try another way through that stress. Right?
I love how David said he uses guacamole scoop with his butt. He says, get this pico de gallo.
Yeah, pico de gallo.
Pico de gallo.
Yes.
Scoop it out. Yes, I know. Peter's like, what is this?
Yeah, because I found the dance counting really confusing. Usually I say 1, 2, 3, go. Instead, they start with 6, 7, 8, go. I'm like, what? Why not 1, 2, 3, go? Confusing. It really just is like, or 7, 8. I don't even know what. They start on some random numbers. It seems so.
5, 6,
5, 6,
7, 8.
yeah.
And he's like, when does the music start? I'm like,
who starts counting numbers?
7, 8. Like, why don't you get it?
I'm like, why are you starting to count at 5? Right? Why not 4? Why not 6?
What do you have to do? I'm telling you,
I struggle.
If you find somebody, like I was just telling Janine, her and her twin sister are dead different. That is good if you can learn to work together because we see it so differently. We learn differently. But when you can start to teach somebody who thinks differently than you do, who learns differently than you do, and you get good at all of that, that's the brain. That's the brain.
So that's where the teaching, interestingly, is brain training. Because when you're teaching, trying to communicate what you're trying to say, and you see the person truly is not getting it, the arrogant teacher is going to, you know what, stupid students. Material is awesome. Students are dumb. The best teachers recognize the proof is in the adoption. They don't get it. That means you're not teaching them right. Try a different method. And that actually speeds up your brain because you now have to think and register actively what they're not getting, not even just on listening to words, body language, facial expression, everything, nonverbal communication. Adjust and try until they show the signals. Do that twice a week. Even by the 3rd time, Tiffany, you'll see, something is changing. Do that for 4 weeks, you'll see a difference. Do it for 12 to 13. You might have just upgraded your default. And you know what ends up happening when you upgrade your default? The next time you're in a crazy stressful meeting or a crazy stressful spousal or child discussion, whatever it might be, you'll be like, this is kind of slow. I'm used to higher speed. Like when I go down like a blue or even a black in skiing, it just feels slow. You know, like when I drive 70, it feels like what used to feel like 40 or 50. Once you get used to higher speed, it's slower. And so guess what happens when it feels slow? I can process everything going on, including the micro signals. Versus, when something feels fast, our brain shuts down. And all you're doing with your internal chatter is, I'm not gonna make it, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. And you are literally stopping your own brain from working. Our brain speed goes down because we do it to ourselves through our own, Sri Kumar called it the second arrow. The second arrow is far more painful than the first arrow. And we all shoot the second arrow ourselves. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to learn how to stop interruption, get interrupted even more in greater speed, more often, consistently. It's painful enough, so I say just do it twice a week. But you'll see at some point comfort goes up. And then you'll get to a place where, I can't stand these meetings, where it's speaking one at a time. And like, we might as well talk through memos, right? It's like, I can't even respond till I see your memo written, but you take forever to write your memo. So then it's like, Jesus, why are we even having this meeting? Right? It's like snails. You ever watch that movie with the snail? What's it? Speed?
Oh, yeah, Speed, is that what
It's
it's
like
called?
Nitro or something, or
Oh, yeah. I forget what it's.
but the snail like
Yeah.
gets doused in
Oh, yeah.
like nitro.
Oh,
And so-
Turbo.
Turbo,
Nadia, say
Turbo, yeah.
Turbo, yeah, Nadia
Like,
knows.
and you see the snails racing, and it's like, they're like, where did we go? And they're all like it will feel like that.
And that's why you write a lot of notes, because you're like, oh God, I can't interrupt every little, so your pacifier
Yeah,
is like
so-
taking notes.
So we have
You
tactical
know, if Charlie is
tips.
scribbling in the meeting that you're in, he's like, this is going so slow and I can't interrupt everything, so I'm gonna have to write my thoughts down. It's frustrating, right? It's not easy being you. That's why we're gonna up our brain speed.
We have the same discussion when we go to dance. I'm literally
I
saying,
know, I'm like, what are you,
like
what are you
like
talking
Megan
about?
will be like, so did you like, isn't that a cool song? It's like, there were words in that
I'm
song?
like, it's Uptown Funk. How do you not know that? He's like, there was that what? There's a song you know that was playing? I'm like,
I
for the
was like,
last
I
hour, you didn't even hear it?
No, like, and I walk away thinking, I thought it was in Spanish or some other language I've never heard.
It's amazing.
But like, she's like, it's a #1 song playing right now. I'm like, what song is it again? And it's like, I know the song, but in the class, I'm like,
Tiffany, we're rooting for you, lady. I am. The superstars on the rise. Yeah, she's like,
Love
we're
it.
gonna be superstars. It's gonna all happen.
you'll
here.
be strong, right?
Rooting for you.
Brady,
Yeah.
LeBron, physical sports. Train your brain. It is the foundation to get in the flow.
If you need a
Once you're in the
boost,
flow,
come to dance with us tonight at 7 with Julian, or you
Yeah.
could do it at 1 o'clock if you're in London. If you need the one, you do whatever you want to do. I'm
But-
just saying.
if you feel like coddling yourself, don't come.
Don't come.
Because there's no need to push yourself because you might get hurt. This is dance class. Like this stuff gets really hard. And try to think and all that stuff at once while looking at numbers and 7, 5, 8, 9, 1, go. Like
It's 5, 6, 7, 8.
Whatever.
you know?
See what I mean?
It's 5,
it's hard stuff.